Hello, so in today's video I'm going to be talking about The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. Over the past, I would say like end of last year, mid to end of last year, I started picking up more classics. I really want to get into reading some classics because the few that I have read I've actually quite enjoyed. And you would have seen this book in a recent book haul of mine. I picked up a few by the Paper Mill Press, and yeah, I really like these designs and these covers, and I picked up a few classics in these editions. And yeah, I thought I would give this one a go. I found this book on audio books as well. If you type it into YouTube, you can find this as a YouTube audiobook. So I kind of tandem listened and read this book, which I found a really enjoyable experience because I have dyslexia, and when I was a kid I've always loved stories. I've always loved the idea of storytelling. I've always loved you know, books, the idea of reading, but I did struggle with actually physically reading books when I was younger. So to help me with my reading, my mum would buy me cassette tapes and books. I used to be able to buy them together. I specifically remember Anna Malark books where the book would come with the tape and I would listen and read at the same time. And I did this with this book, so I listened to it on YouTube whilst reading it, like looking at it physically at the same time, and I found it really enjoyable. I'm definitely going to try and do that with a few more of classics because classics can sometimes take me a little bit longer to read just because of the writing style. And I think doing it that way really helped me, and like I said, I just found it really enjoyable. I read it in one sitting. It's a very short book, and I picked this one up because how many pages is it? Yeah, it's only like 104 pages, but I picked this up because I specifically remember watching The Time Machine, the film, not the original. I think it was like 2000. Is it 2002? The remake, basically, with Samantha Mumba in it. I remember watching it as a kid and I was fascinated by the story. I really enjoyed it, the film, and I've never really watched it for some reason. I might have to try and track it down, like a second-hand version, so that I can re-watch it, because yeah, I remember it being a really interesting story, quite a creepy story, but I'd never read the actual book. And then when I saw this I think I picked this up from HomeSense, I was like, I've got to pick this up and give it a go because I really liked the film, so let's like compare them a little bit. And I have to say the book didn't disappoint either. It is different from the film, and there are some major differences, mainly within the characters and the relationships between the characters. But having said that, I still did enjoy this book. So it starts off with the time traveller, and I actually don't know if you ever know his actual name. I don't think you do. I think he's just referred to as the time traveller throughout this whole book. And a few of the characters are described like that. You don't actually it's not like a character driven plot. You don't get to know many of the characters in this book because at the beginning it's the time traveller and he's in this office with a bunch of other people, and again it doesn't describe them massively. You have a guy from the local paper, I believe, and then you have a man called or referred to as the medical man, so I'm guessing he's a doctor of some kind. And they're all in this room. There's a mayor as well. Basically a bunch of people from like high society are in this room. It's set in like Victorian times, and they're in in this room next to his laboratory, and the time traveller is basically describing this machine that he's built and the possibility of time travel. So it begins off quite, I would say, like technical. They're discussing the possibilities of time travel, like theoretically how you would do that and if you could do that. And then the time traveller presents this miniature machine and demonstrates that he thinks he can do it. And of course all the people in the room, they think it's some kind of trick, some kind of magic trick. He's like some charlatan, and they're trying to like figure out how he did the trick, but they're not quite sure how. And he basically says to them, meet me on this day in, I think it's like a week or something's time, and I will let you know. I'm building this bigger machine. And he shows him the bigger machine, his time machine, and yeah, he's basically like, come back at so and so time on this day and I will prove to you or let you know my findings. So they go away and then they come back for this dinner, and they're setting up for this dinner at his house, and he turns up and then he has this fantastic story to tell them all. He turns up looking all shabby and all dishevelled, and then they go into like this separate like smoking room, and the rest of the story is him basically telling them the story of what happened, of him going off in his time machine and this adventure he has. And yeah, and then basically you're left at the end of the book, and like some of the people believe him, some of the people don't, but they're like, could this be true, could there be proof, and all this kind of stuff. And yeah, it was just a really good adventure story basically. I will say the main guy, the time traveller, it was really interesting. Like his machine was interesting, and like his thoughts were interesting. Like I don't want to give stuff away, but I feel like people know the general gist of the time machine. Like I don't want to give like major, well, I don't know if you could even spoil this because I feel like it is such a well-known story. But yeah, basically he goes way, way, way far into the future, and he is commenting, or like as he goes along, he's kind of commenting on what he's seeing, which I really enjoyed that. The description of when he's actually in the time machine, travelling through time, I really liked the way he described what he saw and what he actually did see. I thought was quite cool. Just like the way he described the moving of the sky and the moving of the landscape. I just found it really interesting and I really liked it. And then obviously when this time machine stops and he's way, way into the future, he starts his adventure of like exploring the land, and the world is kind of split between the upper ground people and then the lower ground people. So the upper ground people, the Eloi, they are very like innocent, they appear very innocent and very like, he's surprised how unafraid they are of him. They're like very accepting, innocent kind of people. They're living a very, very basic life, and he's surprised because he thought, you know, in the future humanity would be like highly intellectual. They're like way more advanced than he is from his time, and yeah, he was expecting like intellectual or people who were way smarter than him kind of a thing, but that was not what he found. He found that obviously he'd gone so far into the future that it'd gone past that point where like we'd gone very much back to basics. So you had the people who lived on the surface in the daytime, and yeah, he finds them fascinating, and it describes him trying to communicate with them, his day-to-day life, and exploring the different foods they have there. And he makes a lot of social commentary. There's a lot of different theories in this about, you know, different social situations and social theories, which I found really interesting. And you would think, because this was written such a long time ago, that it wouldn't, the discussions he's having with himself wouldn't really hold up today, but I still found them really interesting, and it still felt, like, I don't know, like conversations you could still have today. Like it was still interesting, do you know what I mean? Like sometimes you read stuff in the past, especially about time travel, and it feels kind of irrelevant to today's society, but it was still interesting conversations he was having in this book. Yeah, so it's between the Eloi, the day people, and then he also discovers a second group of people who live underground called the Murloc. And they obviously steal his time machine, and he's trying to figure out how to get back, how to get his time machine back, because he doesn't want to be stuck in this place forever. He wants to go back to his time, and he's worried that he is going to be stuck there, and it feels like frantic, like him he feels like he's in a rush, because although he's enjoying where he is and he's fascinated by the different groups of people and wants to study them, he's also worried that he's going to be stuck there and he wants to go back to his own time. And yeah, his different theories about why this happened, why there are separate societies, the people who live on the land and the people who live underground, and he has different theories about them, and there's some kind of machinery underground, and it doesn't go too in depth into the two different sets of humanity, and the Eloi and the Murloc, but it's like interesting enough to keep you going. You're like interested in the different, I guess, species of human that have evolved over time. Like, you're interested in that, but then there's also this frantic rush for him to get back to his time machine. And yeah, I feel like it was a really interesting story. For such a short book, it was very interesting. I can see why it's a classic, why people enjoy this story so much. There are major differences between the film and the book. Like, I think from what I can remember, because like I said, it's been like I was a child when I watched the film, I remember there being like a love interest in the beginning, and then she dies or something, and that's his motivation for building the time machine. There's none of that in this book. He's just purely a scientific guy who's fascinated with time travel, and he's made it like his life mission to do this, and he just does it out of the interest. There's no like reason for him to want to go back or forward in time other than he's interested and he wants to study humanity and the possibility of time travel, which fit in well with his character in this book. I will say the time traveller himself as a character isn't particularly a likeable character. Like, he gives off kind of douchey vibes. Like, I wouldn't say it's like, oh yeah, you're really rooting for him in the story. Like I said, I was more interested in the adventure himself and the world he ended up in, rather than the character himself. Like, if anything happened to him in this book, I wasn't too fussed. Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah, he just came across, like, the way he spoke about the people, the other species of humans and stuff, and the presumptions he made. He comes across as a very presumptuous person. He's very almost narcissistic. Like, he's very sure of himself and like his theories. He's like, oh well, this must be the truth of what's happened, and then he finds out something else and he was like, oh no, I was wrong, actually this happened. And then, you know, like, he's coming up with all these different theories in his own mind. It feels almost like he has a kind of superiority complex, even when he's retelling the story to his peers. Like, he has this kind of arrogance about him, where he's like, well, some of you may believe me and some of you may not, but this is what actually happened. And yeah, he gave off those vibes, if you know what I mean. So the character, the time traveller himself, isn't particularly likeable, but the story itself was very interesting, and it could have been a longer book. I would have happily read more about the future that he ended up in. I found it very interesting, and yeah, in that aspect it did mirror the films, because I remember that happening in the films. There was just no real solid love interest in the book as there is in the films. I think that the films very much tried to romanticize the time traveller, whereas, and it kind of came across as more of like a man was doing it out of, the man wanted to invent this time machine for different purposes other than just he was really interested and because he could. Whereas in the book it very much comes across as that he's just a very scientific man. Like I said, you don't even find out what his name is in the book. He's just referred to as the time traveller. But yeah, really interesting. I'm really glad I read it. I would read it again. Like I said, if you're interested in time travel, or if you enjoyed the films like I did, then definitely check out the book. It was good. It was a good read. I would definitely recommend. So yeah, if anyone else has read this book, let me know your comments down below. Would you be interested to read this book? I'm very much interested in time travel. I really like films that involve time travel and all the different ways people try and explore that, and the possibilities of the future, and would it be possible. Yeah, it was good. It was a good read. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about The Time Machine. I would give it a 5 out of 5, to be honest. I did thoroughly enjoy it, although I do also acknowledge that the time traveller himself, like I said, comes across as a very arrogant kind of man, and I feel like there are some problematic language used here and there in this book, which was a little bit like, oh, it's very much a book of its times, but yeah, I did enjoy it. So yeah, let me know your thoughts down below. Have you read it? Would you be ever interested in reading it? Did you enjoy it? And if you didn't enjoy it, then please let me know down below. I would be very interested to hear your thoughts. I did look it up on Goodreads, and again, majority, it's a classic, so majority of the reviews are positive. There were some negatives though, and some of the negative reviews I would agree with, and the negatives would be like he wasn't a very likeable character, like those kinds of things I do agree with. But again, like I said in my last book review, I don't have to have likeable characters to enjoy the story. I can quite happily read from the perspective of a character I think is an arsehole, and if the story itself is interesting, then I can still enjoy the book overall. I don't have to like wholly love the main character to enjoy the story. But if you're somebody who, when you read a book, you really like in-depth characters, because there's no real depth to this character. It doesn't really go, like I said, you don't even know his name. It doesn't go into any backstory of the time traveller. There's no real character development, I don't think. Like, even though he went on this big journey, like when he comes back, I still feel like he's kind of the same person. But yeah, I enjoyed it for the story alone. So I forgot what I was saying, but I'm going to stop talking now because I've been rambling about this book for too long. Yeah, so let me know you guys' thoughts. So as always, thank you for watching, and until next time, bye guys.